Imagine standing before two identical paths deep inside an ancient forest. One path disappears into sunlight, the other disappears into shadow. You know you must choose, but instead of taking a step, you begin asking yourself endless questions. What if I choose the wrong path? What if the other path is better? What if I fail? What if I regret this forever? Minutes become hours, hours become days. Eventually, something unexpected happens. The greatest danger is no longer choosing the wrong path. The greatest danger is that you never move at all. Now ask yourself one question. How much of your life has been lost not because you made bad decisions, but because you were too afraid to make any decision at all? This is the hidden cost of overthinking. It rarely announces itself. It doesn't arrive like a storm. Instead, it enters quietly. It disguises itself as responsibility, as preparation, as intelligence. It whispers, "Think about it one more time. Wait until you're completely certain. Gather more information. Don't make a mistake." And before long, weeks become months, months become years, dreams remain dreams, conversations never happen, opportunities quietly disappear, not because you lacked ability, but because you kept waiting for perfect certainty. The Stoics understood something that modern life often forgets. Clarity is rarely found before action. More often, it appears because of action. Imagine a sailor standing at the edge of the sea. He studies every cloud, measures every wave, calculates every possibility. He waits for the perfect day to begin his journey. But the ocean never becomes perfectly calm. The weather never offers complete certainty. Eventually, another sailor with less knowledge but greater courage raises his sails and disappears over the horizon. Years later, the first sailor is still standing on the shore. His maps are more detailed, his plans more complete, his confidence never arrived. Many people live exactly this way. They mistake endless preparation for progress. But preparation without action slowly becomes another form of fear. Marcus Aurelius wrote during some of the most uncertain years in Roman history. War surrounded the empire. Disease spread through entire cities. Political betrayal was common. Each day demanded difficult decisions. Imagine carrying the responsibility of millions of lives while knowing that every choice might be criticized. Yet, Marcus could not afford endless hesitation. He understood something every leader eventually learns. Waiting for absolute certainty is itself a decision, and often it is the most dangerous one. There is an old story about a young archer who dreamed of becoming the greatest marksman in the kingdom. Every morning he visited the training grounds. He carefully examined the bow, adjusted the string, studied the wind, measured the distance, observed experienced archers for hours. But he rarely released an arrow. He feared wasting a shot. He feared missing the target. He feared looking foolish. One afternoon, an elderly master watched quietly before asking, "How many arrows have you imagined shooting?" "Thousands," the young man replied. "And how many have you actually released?" The student lowered his eyes. "Very few." The old master smiled gently. "Then your imagination has received more practice than your courage." Those words changed everything. Because overthinking often gives our fears more training than our strengths. Modern psychology describes this as rumination. Instead of solving problems, the mind repeats them again and again and again. It feels productive because we are thinking. But thinking is not always progress. Imagine sitting in a rocking chair. You move constantly, yet you never travel anywhere. Overthinking works much the same way. The mind becomes exhausted. The body becomes tense. Sleep becomes difficult. Confidence slowly disappears. Not because life became harder, but because every possible outcome has already been rehearsed 100 times inside your imagination. Epictetus believed that much of human suffering comes from confusing imagination with reality. How often do we fear conversations that never happen? How often do we replay arguments that don't exist? How often do we create disasters entirely inside our own minds? Imagine holding a lantern while walking through a dark valley. The light only reaches a few steps ahead. You cannot see the entire journey. You cannot see every mountain, every turn, every bridge. If you refused to move until the lantern illuminated the whole road, you would remain exactly where you started. Life works the same way. Wisdom rarely reveals the entire path. It reveals the next step, and the next, and the next. Trust grows one decision at a time, not all at once. There is another story about a stone cutter who worked beside a mountain for decades. Every morning he struck the same enormous rock with his hammer. One blow, then another, then another. For weeks, nothing changed. Visitors laughed. "You'll never break that stone." The stone cutter simply smiled and continued. Then one morning, after thousands of strikes, the rock split cleanly in two. People said that final blow broke it. The stone cutter quietly shook his head. No, it was every blow before it. Confidence develops exactly the same way, not through one perfect decision, but through hundreds of imperfect ones. Every time you trust yourself enough to act, you strengthen something invisible, your belief that you can handle whatever comes next. Seneca warned against becoming trapped by the illusion of certainty. He believed many people suffer more in imagination than in reality. Think about that. How many opportunities have disappeared because you imagined failure before giving yourself a chance to succeed? How many conversations never happened because you predicted rejection? How many dreams remained untouched because you demanded guarantees life was never meant to provide? The Stoics remind us that courage is not the absence of uncertainty. It is the decision to move despite uncertainty. Perhaps that is the lesson hidden inside every meaningful life. No inventor knew exactly how their creation would turn out. No explorer saw the entire journey before taking the first step. No artist knew whether the world would appreciate their work. They simply began. Overthinking says, wait until you're ready. Wisdom quietly answers, you become ready by beginning. We'll explore why the human mind becomes trapped in endless self-doubt, what modern psychology teaches about breaking the cycle of rumination, and how Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca learned to replace fear with calm judgment and quiet confidence, because perhaps the greatest decision you'll ever make is deciding to trust yourself before you feel completely certain. And that single decision can change the course of your entire life. Have you ever noticed something strange? The decisions that matter most are rarely the ones that consume the most time. Instead, it is often the smallest choices that quietly steal our peace. Should I send the message? Should I accept the opportunity? Should I speak up? Should I say no? Should I leave? Should I stay? One simple decision becomes 10 possibilities. 10 possibilities become 100 imagined outcomes. Before long, your mind is racing so fast that you can no longer hear your own judgment. Now ask yourself another question. When was the last time overthinking actually gave you peace? Probably never, because overthinking promises certainty, but it delivers confusion. It promises protection, but it often creates fear. It promises control, but it usually leaves us feeling powerless. This is one of the greatest illusions of the human mind. Many people believe they overthink because they care deeply. Sometimes that's true, but psychology suggests something deeper is happening. Most overthinking begins with one hidden fear, the fear of making the wrong choice. Imagine standing in front of a mirror that reflects not your face, but every mistake you've ever made, every regret, every embarrassment, every failure, every missed opportunity. Eventually, you stop seeing who you are. You only see who you're afraid of becoming. This is what chronic self-doubt often feels like. Instead of trusting your ability to recover from mistakes, you become obsessed with preventing every possible mistake. The result? You stop moving. Modern psychology calls this analysis paralysis. When faced with too many possibilities or too much fear, the brain delays action. Ironically, the very strategy meant to protect us begins creating more stress. Imagine a rabbit standing in the middle of a road. One direction leads to safety, the other leads back into the forest. Unable to decide, the rabbit freezes. It isn't weakness, it's overload. Many people live emotionally frozen in exactly the same way. They don't lack intelligence, they lack permission to be imperfect. Marcus Aurelius understood that no human being could avoid mistakes. Even as emperor, he made decisions without knowing exactly how events would unfold. He couldn't control the future. He could only control the quality of his judgment in the present. That distinction changed everything. The Stoics never asked, will this decision guarantee success? Instead, they asked, is this decision guided by wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control? Because outcomes belong partly to fate, character belongs entirely to you. There is an old story about a young bridge builder apprenticing under a master engineer. One afternoon, the apprentice spent hours calculating every measurement. He erased his drawings again and again. Nothing seemed perfect. Finally, the master approached and quietly asked, "Why haven't you begun?" "I'm afraid the bridge won't be perfect." The old engineer smiled. "The first bridge never is." He pointed toward a magnificent stone bridge spanning a wide river. "Do you see that bridge?" "Yes, it is my 43rd. The apprentice looked surprised. "The first 42 taught me how to build this one." The lesson was unforgettable. Perfection is not the starting point. It is often the result of many imperfect beginnings. Yet overthinking convinces us the opposite is true. It tells us we must feel confident before acting. Reality teaches something entirely different. Confidence usually comes after action, not before it. Epictetus believed that people become disturbed not by events themselves, but by the judgments they attach to them. Imagine receiving an invitation to give a speech. One person thinks, this is an exciting opportunity. Another thinks, everyone will judge me. The event is identical, only the interpretation changes. The mind often creates suffering long before reality has the chance to. Modern neuroscience reveals something fascinating. When we repeatedly imagine negative outcomes, the brain begins responding as though those events are already happening. Your heart races, your muscles tighten, stress hormones increase. The body cannot always distinguish between real danger and vividly imagined danger. This is why people can become exhausted without ever leaving their chair. Their body has been fighting imaginary battles all day. Seneca recognized this centuries ago when he wrote that we often suffer more in imagination than in reality. Think about how many conversations you've rehearsed that never happened, how many disasters you've predicted that never arrived, how many sleepless nights were spent fearing tomorrow, only to discover tomorrow was far kinder than your imagination expected. There is another story about a violin student preparing for her first public performance. For weeks she practiced perfectly at home, yet every night before the concert she imagined forgetting every note. She pictured people laughing, walking out, judging her. When performance day finally arrived, something remarkable happened. She played beautifully. Afterward, her teacher asked, "How many mistakes did you imagine before today?" "Hundreds." "And how many actually happened?" She smiled. "Only one." The teacher nodded. "You spent weeks preparing for 99 problems that never existed. Many of us do exactly that. We prepare endlessly for futures that never arrive. Meanwhile, the present quietly passes us by." The Stoics believed attention is one of life's greatest treasures. Every moment spent trapped in unnecessary worry is a moment no longer available for living. Imagine carrying a backpack filled with stones. Each stone represents a future that hasn't happened yet. What if I fail? What if they reject me? What if everything goes wrong? The heavier the backpack becomes, the slower you walk. Then one day, someone asks a simple question. Which of these stones belongs to today? You look inside, perhaps only one. The rest belong to imaginary tomorrows. Marcus Aurelius constantly brought his attention back to the present moment, not because tomorrow didn't matter, but because tomorrow could only be influenced by what he chose today. Not by endless worrying, by thoughtful action. There is a profound difference between planning and overthinking. Planning prepares you for action. Overthinking postpones action. Planning ends with movement. Overthinking often ends with exhaustion. The ego says, think until every risk disappears. Wisdom quietly answers, no amount of thinking can eliminate uncertainty. The courage to act is born the moment you accept that uncertainty is part of every meaningful life. We'll walk beside Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca as they faced war, exile, criticism, illness, and uncertainty, not with perfect confidence, but with calm judgment and unwavering trust in their own character. Because the strongest people are not those who know exactly what will happen. They are the ones who trust themselves enough to face whatever does. Imagine standing in the middle of a violent storm. The wind roars through the trees. Rain falls so heavily that the road ahead disappears. Lightning flashes across the sky. In moments like these, most people instinctively search for something solid to hold on to. A tree, a rock, a shelter. Now imagine another kind of storm. Not outside, but inside your own mind. The storm of self-doubt, the storm of fear, the storm of endless what-if questions. Where do you find something solid then? The Stoics believed the answer was simple. You become the solid ground. Marcus Aurelius understood this better than almost anyone. Every morning he woke knowing he would face uncertainty. He could not predict the outcome of wars. He could not control disease spreading across the empire. He could not guarantee loyalty from political allies. He certainly could not control what millions of people thought about him. Yet he never built his peace upon those uncertain things. Instead, he built it upon his character. Imagine constructing two houses. The first is built on soft sand, the second rests on solid stone. When the storm arrives, both experience the same wind, the same rain, the same darkness, but only one remains standing. Marcus believed your values should become that foundation: wisdom, justice, courage, self-control. These qualities remain steady even when circumstances do not. This is why he repeatedly reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Think about how different life becomes when you truly understand those words. You stop waiting for certainty before making decisions. You stop demanding that life remove every obstacle. Instead, you trust something much stronger, your ability to respond wisely. There is an old story about a ship captain crossing the Mediterranean Sea. A violent storm suddenly appeared. The crew panicked. Some shouted conflicting instructions. Others froze in fear. The youngest sailor desperately asked, "Captain, aren't you afraid?" The old captain smiled. "Of course. Then why are you so calm?" "Because fear cannot steer a ship. Only judgment can." That answer reflects the very heart of Stoicism. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is refusing to let fear become your decision-maker. Epictetus arrived at this wisdom through hardship rather than power. Before becoming one of history's greatest philosophers, he lived as a slave. He owned almost nothing. His future depended on decisions made by other people. Many would have surrendered to hopelessness. Instead, Epictetus discovered something extraordinary. Even when others controlled his circumstances, they could not control his mind. Imagine a prisoner sitting inside a small stone cell. One prisoner spends every day imagining escape. Another spends every day strengthening his character. Years later, one leaves with bitterness. The other leaves with wisdom. Both experienced the same prison. Only one refused to let it become part of his identity. Epictetus constantly reminded his students to separate two things: what belongs to you and what never has. Your effort belongs to you. Your integrity belongs to you. Your judgment belongs to you. Your choices belong to you, but the opinions of others, they never belonged to you. Neither did luck, reputation, success, or perfect outcomes. Imagine carrying a bow and arrow. You carefully choose the target. You steady your breathing. You aim with patience. Then you release the arrow. At that exact moment, the wind may change. The target may move. Rain may begin to fall. The Stoics would say, Your responsibility ended the moment you released the arrow with your best effort. Everything afterward belongs to nature. How much suffering disappears once you understand this? You stop demanding certainty. You stop demanding guarantees. You simply give your best, again and again and again. Seneca approached the problem of overthinking from another direction. He noticed that people often delayed living because they were waiting for the perfect time, the perfect opportunity, the perfect relationship, the perfect amount of confidence. But perfection is a horizon. Every time you move closer, it moves farther away. There is a story about an elderly potter whose workshop was famous throughout the region. Visitors admired the flawless pottery lining his shelves. One young apprentice asked, "How do you make every piece so perfect?" The old potter laughed. "They only look perfect because you cannot see the hundreds that broke." He walked behind the workshop and pointed toward a pile of shattered clay. "Those taught me everything." The apprentice stared silently. The potter continued, "If I had waited until I was certain of success, I would still be holding my first lump of clay." That story reminds us of a truth the ego desperately wants to avoid. Mistakes are not proof that you cannot be trusted. They are proof that you are learning. Marcus Aurelius understood that no decision could guarantee success. The only guarantee available was this: he could meet every outcome with dignity. Modern psychology agrees. Researchers studying resilience consistently find that confident people are not those who believe they will never fail. They are those who believe they can recover if they do. That difference changes everything. Imagine two climbers standing before the same mountain. One says, "I hope I never fall." The other says, "If I fall, I'll stand up again." Which climber walks with greater confidence? Not the one who expects perfection, the one who trusts their resilience. That is exactly what the Stoics practiced. Not blind optimism, not reckless confidence. Steady trust in their own ability to adapt, to learn, to endure, to grow. There is another story about a young musician invited to perform before the emperor. The night before the performance, she barely slept. She imagined every possible mistake, every forgotten note, every disappointed face. The next morning, her teacher handed her a single sheet of paper. On it were only 6 words: "Play the music." Not your fear. She carried those words onto the stage. Years later, she admitted something remarkable: the fear never disappeared. But once she focused on the music instead of herself, the fear became much smaller. Isn't life often the same? Overthinking keeps our attention on ourselves. What if I fail? What will they think? What if I embarrass myself? Wisdom shifts attention toward the work, toward serving, toward learning, toward taking the next step. That is where confidence quietly grows. We'll explore inspiring stories of ordinary people who escaped the prison of overthinking, not because life became easier, but because they finally trusted themselves enough to take the first step before they felt completely ready. Because every meaningful journey begins with the same quiet decision: I may not know exactly what lies ahead, but I trust myself enough to keep walking. There is a quiet truth that many people discover only after years of unnecessary worry. The life you are afraid to live is often the very life waiting to set you free. Not because it is easy, not because success is guaranteed, but because action teaches lessons that overthinking never can. Imagine 2 doors standing side by side. Behind the first door is certainty. Every outcome is known. Every risk has disappeared. Every mistake has already been prevented. Behind the second door is real life. Uncertainty, growth, failure, discovery, love, loss, wisdom. Most people spend years searching for the first door. The tragedy is that it does not exist. Life has always been behind the second. There is an old story about a young woman named Eleanor who dreamed of opening a small bookstore. Since childhood, she imagined shelves filled with books, warm conversations with strangers, and a quiet corner where people could escape the noise of the world. But every time she came close to beginning, another question appeared. What if no one comes? What if I lose my savings? What if I fail? So she waited. She researched. She made business plans. She read every book on entrepreneurship she could find. Years passed. One afternoon, while walking through her city, she noticed an empty building where her dream bookstore could have been.
Instead, another owner had already opened one. It was filled with readers laughing over coffee. Children sat quietly in corners turning pages. The dream she had protected so carefully was now being lived by someone else. She stood outside for a long time, not because she envied the owner, but because she finally understood something painful. The greatest loss had never been failure. It had been hesitation. Many people carry stories like Eleanor's, different dreams, different fears, the same pattern. They postpone life while waiting to feel ready. The Stoics would gently remind us that readiness is often the reward of action, not the condition for it. Marcus Aurelius never waited until every uncertainty disappeared before making decisions. Imagine leading an empire during war. Every choice carries consequences. Some decisions save lives, others bring hardship. No emperor could know every outcome, yet refusing to decide would have been a decision itself. Marcus accepted that wisdom was not perfect prediction. It was making the best decision possible with the knowledge available. That principle still applies today. You don't need perfect information. You need honest judgment. There is another story about a mountain guide who spent 40 years leading travelers across dangerous peaks. A young apprentice once asked, "How do you know which path is the right one?" The old guide smiled. "I don't always." The apprentice looked surprised. "Then how do you lead people safely?" "I choose the best path I can see, and if it turns out to be wrong, I adjust." The apprentice remained silent. The guide continued walking. Mountains reward movement. They punish hesitation. Life often works the same way. The ego tells us that changing direction means failure. Wisdom understands that changing direction is sometimes part of reaching the destination. Modern psychology calls this adaptive thinking. Mentally resilient people do not expect perfect decisions. They expect to learn. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" they ask, "What will this experience teach me?" That single change transforms fear into curiosity. Imagine a child learning to ride a bicycle. No parent expects perfection on the first attempt. The child falls, stands up, falls again, adjusts, learns balance. Eventually, riding becomes effortless. Now imagine if the child decided after the first fall, "Perhaps I'm simply not meant to ride," the skill would never develop. Adults often treat themselves with far less patience than they would ever offer a child. One mistake becomes evidence that they are incapable. One rejection becomes proof they should stop trying. One setback becomes an identity. The Stoics refused to define themselves by individual outcomes. Epictetus taught that events do not determine who you are, your response does. There is a story about an elderly calligrapher famous for his beautiful handwriting. Every morning before beginning his masterpieces, he intentionally wrote one imperfect page. A student finally asked, "Why do you begin with mistakes?" The old artist smiled. "So I remember that perfection is not my master. I serve the work, not my fear." That lesson reaches far beyond art. Overthinking often begins because we become more concerned with protecting our image than expressing our purpose. We stop asking, "What needs to be done?" Instead we ask, "What if people judge me?" The ego wants admiration. Purpose wants action. Imagine planting 2 trees. The first is constantly moved from place to place because the gardener keeps wondering whether another location might be better. The second remains rooted despite changing seasons. Years later, only one has grown tall enough to provide shade. Not because it had better soil, because it stayed long enough to grow. Many dreams never become reality because they are uprooted by doubt before they have time to take root. Seneca often reminded his students that fortune favors those willing to meet uncertainty with courage rather than fear. Not because courage guarantees success, because courage creates possibility. Fear rarely does. There is one final story. An old lighthouse keeper spent decades guiding ships safely through storms. One evening, a young sailor asked, "How do you know where every ship should go?" The keeper quietly shook his head. "I don't. I simply keep the light burning." The sailor looked puzzled. "The captains steer the ships. My responsibility is only to make the next safe step visible." That image beautifully captures the Stoic approach to life. You do not need to illuminate your entire future. You only need enough light for the next decision, then the next, then the next. Confidence is built exactly this way, not through certainty, through repeated acts of courage. Every conversation you were afraid to begin, every opportunity you almost declined, every challenge you decided to face despite uncertainty, each one becomes another stone in the foundation of self-trust. One day you'll look back and realize something extraordinary. The person you were waiting to become was quietly being created every time you acted before you felt completely ready. We'll transform these timeless lessons into practical daily Stoic habits, simple exercises you can practice every day to quiet an overactive mind, strengthen your confidence, and replace endless overthinking with calm, decisive action. Because trusting yourself is not a feeling that suddenly appears. It is a habit you build, one courageous choice at a time. By now, one thing has become clear. Overthinking is not a sign that you are broken. It is a habit, and like every habit, it can be replaced. The Stoics never searched for complicated solutions. They believed extraordinary lives were built through ordinary disciplines practiced consistently. Marcus Aurelius did not become calm because life became easier. Epictetus did not become confident because uncertainty disappeared. Seneca did not become wise because every decision worked perfectly. They became stronger because they trained their minds every single day. Imagine a blacksmith standing before a glowing piece of iron. One strike of the hammer changes very little, but hundreds of steady strikes slowly transform raw metal into a beautiful sword. Your mind develops in exactly the same way. One moment of courage may seem small. One calm response may appear insignificant. One decision made despite uncertainty may feel ordinary, yet repeated every day. These moments reshape your character. Here are 10 practical Stoic habits you can begin today, not next week, not when you finally feel confident. Today. 1. Limit your thinking time. The Stoics valued thoughtful reflection, but they also understood that endless thinking becomes another form of avoidance. Whenever you're facing an important decision, give yourself a reasonable amount of time, perhaps 30 minutes, perhaps one day, then decide. Do not let your mind reopen the same question 100 times. A decision made with wisdom is better than a perfect decision that never arrives. 2. Ask one powerful question. Whenever anxiety begins whispering, "What if everything goes wrong?" Replace it with another question. If something goes wrong, can I handle it? Notice the difference. The first question creates fear. The second creates confidence. Trust is not believing life will always be easy. Trust is believing you will adapt. 3. Separate facts from stories. Take a sheet of paper, draw a line down the center. On one side, write facts. On the other, write stories my mind is creating. For example, fact, I haven't received a reply. Story, they must be upset with me. Fact, I made one mistake. Story, I'm a complete failure. This simple exercise exposes how often overthinking invents problems that reality never confirmed. 4. Focus on today's step. Imagine climbing a mountain while staring only at the distant summit. Eventually you become overwhelmed. Instead, experienced climbers focus on the next safe step. Life works exactly the same way. Don't ask, how will everything turn out? Ask, what is the next right action? Marcus Aurelius constantly returned his attention to the present moment because that was the only place where action was possible. 5. Practice imperfect action. Each day, intentionally do one small thing before you feel completely ready. Send the message, apply for the opportunity, start the project, speak honestly. The goal is not perfection. The goal is movement. Confidence grows through evidence. Action creates that evidence. 6. Accept that mistakes are tuition. Imagine enrolling in the greatest university on earth. Would you expect the education to be free? Of course not. Mistakes are the tuition we pay for wisdom. Every successful person carries invisible failures. The difference is not that they avoided mistakes. They refused to let mistakes define them. Seneca believed every setback could become a teacher if approached with humility. 7. Build a daily quiet hour. Modern life constantly fills the mind with noise, notifications, opinions, breaking news, social media, comparisons. The ego thrives in noise. Wisdom grows in silence. Spend at least 15 minutes each day without digital distractions. Walk, journal, reflect. Simply observe your thoughts without believing every one of them. Soon you'll notice something remarkable. Not every thought deserves your attention. 8. Stop chasing perfect outcomes. Epictetus reminded his students to focus on what belongs to them. Your effort belongs to you. Your attitude belongs to you. Your integrity belongs to you. The outcome does not. Imagine planting a seed. You can water it, protect it, care for it, but you cannot force it to grow overnight. Life asks for effort, not guarantees. 9. Keep promises to yourself. Self-trust is built the same way trust is built with anyone else, by keeping your word. If you promise yourself a morning walk, take it. If you promise yourself 30 minutes of reading, read. Every promise kept becomes another piece of evidence that you can rely on yourself. Every broken promise quietly weakens that belief. Confidence is not given. It is earned through consistency. 10. End each day like Marcus Aurelius. Before sleeping, ask yourself 3 questions. What worried me today that never actually happened? Where did I choose courage over fear? What is one decision I'm proud I made today? Do not search for perfection, search for progress. Small victories repeated over months create extraordinary lives. There is an old story about a young sculptor who admired a magnificent marble statue displayed in the center of his village. He asked the elderly artist, "How did you create something so beautiful?" The old sculptor smiled. "I didn't begin by carving the statue. I began by making one careful strike, and then another, and another." The young man looked at the enormous masterpiece. "It doesn't seem possible that something so great began so small." The sculptor nodded. "Everything great does. The same is true for your confidence. You do not wake up one morning completely free from overthinking. You become free one decision at a time, one courageous conversation, one imperfect action, one moment of choosing. Faith over fear. Eventually, something remarkable happens. The questions inside your mind become quieter. Not because you suddenly know every answer, but because you have learned something far more valuable. You trust yourself to find them. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that each new day offered another opportunity to practice virtue, not to become perfect, but to become a little wiser than yesterday. That is the Stoic path. Progress, not perfection. We'll bring everything together with a powerful 30-day self-trust challenge, a daily practice inspired by Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca that will help you replace hesitation with action, self-doubt with quiet confidence, and overthinking with a peaceful mind, because the life you've been waiting for doesn't begin when fear disappears. It begins the moment you decide that your courage is stronger than your doubt. Imagine that you're 80 years old. You are sitting quietly on a wooden bench as the sun slowly disappears beyond the horizon. The evening air is cool. The world has become wonderfully still. As you look back over your life, countless memories begin to surface. Some bring smiles, others bring tears, but one question rises. Above them all, what if I had trusted myself sooner? Not, what if I had been more intelligent? Not, what if I had been richer? Not, what if everyone had approved of me? Instead, what beautiful experiences did I miss because I spent too much time doubting myself? For many people, life's greatest regrets are not the mistakes they made. They are the opportunities they never embraced, the words they never spoke, the dreams they never pursued, the love they never expressed, the adventures they postponed while waiting to feel completely ready. The Stoics understood a truth that remains just as powerful today. Life belongs to those who are willing to act despite uncertainty. Marcus Aurelius never waited for perfect confidence before fulfilling his responsibilities. Epictetus never allowed difficult circumstances to define his future. Seneca never expected life to remove every obstacle before he chose courage. They all understood something simple. Confidence is not a prerequisite for action. It is often the reward of action. Take a moment to think about everything you've overcome already. The difficult conversations you survived, the heartbreaks that once felt impossible, the failures you believed would define you forever, the mornings you didn't think you could face, yet somehow you did. You are living proof that you have handled challenges before. Why assume you won't handle the next one? Imagine standing beside a river. You notice to travelers, The first refuses to cross until every stone beneath the water becomes visible. The second studies the current, chooses the safest step, and begins. Neither traveler knows exactly what lies on the opposite shore, but only one ever discovers it. That is the difference between fear and faith. Not faith that life will always go your way. Faith that whatever happens, you will grow through it. There is an old story about a violin maker who spent more than 50 years crafting instruments by hand. Near the end of his life, a young apprentice asked, "What is the secret to making something extraordinary?" The old craftsman gently ran his hand across a finished violin and replied, "I stopped trying to create perfection. I started creating with honesty." The apprentice looked confused. The violin maker smiled. Perfection belongs to imagination. Music belongs to those willing to play. How many people spend their lives polishing an instrument they never have the courage to play? How many books remain unwritten because the first sentence isn't perfect? How many businesses never begin because success isn't guaranteed? How many friendships quietly fade because no one wants to make the first phone call? Overthinking convinces us that waiting keeps us safe. But waiting also has a cost. Every day spent trapped inside fear is a day that can never be lived again. That is why I'd like to invite you to begin a 30-day self-trust challenge. Not to become fearless, not to become perfect, but to become someone who acts with wisdom even when certainty is impossible. Every morning before checking your phone or reading the news, ask yourself one question. What is one courageous action I can take today? Not the biggest action, not the most impressive one, just the next right step. Then take it. Send the message, begin the project. Speak honestly, apply for the opportunity, forgive someone, ask for help, say no when your values require it, or simply trust your own judgment instead of asking for one more opinion. Every evening, spend 5 quiet minutes reflecting on these 3 questions. What did I overthink today? What action did I take despite uncertainty? What did today's experience teach me about my own strength? If you repeat this practice for 30 days, something remarkable begins to happen. The voice of fear grows quieter, the habit of hesitation becomes weaker. The need for perfect certainty slowly disappears, and in its place, a quiet confidence begins to grow, not because life becomes predictable, but because you finally trust the one person who has been with you through every challenge, yourself. If this story has encouraged you, I'd love to hear from you. What is one decision you've been overthinking that you're finally ready to make? Share your answer in the comments below. Your courage may become the encouragement someone else needs today. And if you enjoy videos about Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, psychology, mental strength, self-improvement, and timeless life lessons, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join this community. Every week, we explore practical wisdom that helps you build resilience, emotional clarity, quiet confidence, and lasting inner peace. Before you leave, remember this. The tallest oak tree did not become strong because it avoided every storm. It became strong because it kept growing through them. Your confidence will grow the same way, not by avoiding uncertainty, but by walking through it. Not by knowing every answer, but by trusting your ability to find them. Not by waiting until fear disappears, but by choosing courage while fear is still present. So take the next step, trust your judgment, honor your values, and keep moving forward. Because one day you'll look back and realize that the life you were searching for didn't begin when everything became certain. It began the moment you finally believed that you were capable of handling whatever came next. And that is the quiet power of Stoicism, not predicting the future, but meeting it with courage, wisdom, and an unshakable trust in yourself.